Hey guys, my name is Timio, and with a recent patch update to Battlefield 4, a lot of things have changed in the game, and I would say for the most part, it's been a good thing. DICE really went in, they balanced things out, we got a bunch of new weapons for the Naval Strike DLC, the vehicle combat feels a lot more solid and consistent, and I would say for the most part that the patch has been a success. One thing that I was not expecting from it though, is that the Javelin has seen a ridiculous increase to its damage. Before the patch, the Javelin was probably one of the least used anti-vehicle weapons in the game. It did a solid 25 damage, it was decent, it got the job done, it didn't require a lot of skill, and because of that, I'm assuming DICE didn't want it to do a whole lot of damage. The way it works, if you're not aware, you lock onto a tank with this weapon, you hold and maintain the lock, and the rocket will fly towards it. If you lose the lock, the rocket will fly in a random direction, it won't hit it unless it was laser designated, and so that's probably one of the main reasons why a lot of people avoided this. Like, they would much rather just use the SRA. It's basically the same thing, but the SRA can be used for taking out air vehicles. It did a lot more damage if you were able to take a tank by surprise and get a rear shot off on them. And so the Javelin, while it was very consistent, having that 25 damage is always good, it just wasn't a very useful gadget at taking out a lot of vehicles. And so now with the recent patch update, DICE decided to up that damage from 25 all the way up to 34. This is a game changer, because before this patch, it required 4 Javelins to take out a vehicle, and now it only requires 3. And so just from a damage standpoint, that is an absurd amount of firepower at your fingertips, and usually for the most part, that's going to take out a tank way faster than an RPG or the SRA ever could, because while the RPG or the SRA, if you are able to get a nice flank off and you're able to catch them by surprise and get some nice rear shots off, then yeah, they're going to do a lot more damage. But usually, if you're going against a tank driver that actually knows what they're doing, they're gonna face the front of their vehicle to you, so you're not getting the full damage out of the RPG and the SRA. You're going to do more around 22 to 25 damage per shot. And so when you compare that to the Javelin, all of a sudden, this gadget that was normally useless all of a sudden becomes way more appealing. Not only that, but I also discovered that you can perform what I like to call the Wombo Combo. The Wombo Combo I first started to use with the SRA. The way it worked is that you would shoot a SRA up into the air, you would quickly reload another SRA back into the canister or back into your rocket, and then fire another one at the tank. You would continue to aim at the tank, and then because of the way that the guided system worked, they would both basically hit at the same time. But DICE decided that that was a little bit too powerful. It did a little bit too much damage a little bit too quickly, and so they went in and nerfed it. And so the Wombo Combo, sadly, is no longer available for the SRA. But I discovered that you can now actually do that with the Javelin, and instead of doing potentially 50 damage with the SRA combo, you can now do 68 damage with the Javelin almost instantaneously. It works basically the same way that the SRA did before. You find a tank that's a fair distance away, you don't want to do this to a tank that's right next to you, but you lock onto it, you fire your Javelin, and then immediately reload. And then once you have the next Javelin ready, lock on with the new one, let it fly, and then maintain your lock. As long as you maintain the lock and the tank or whatever vehicle you're trying to take out doesn't go behind line of sight, or they use some sort of countermeasure that negates your Javelins, both of your Javelins are gonna hit basically at the same time, maybe a couple of seconds between them, but it's gonna do a solid 68 damage per shot. And then all you need to do at that point is reload another one in there that only takes a couple of seconds, fire it off, and now, as long as they don't duck behind cover or have some sort of crazy maneuver that they're gonna pull out of their ass, you now secured an easy tank kill. Like, that is just crazy to me. The fact that DICE went in and nerfed the Wombo Combo with the SRA, but then decided that it was a good idea to buff the damage of the Javelin to 34, but also kept in what I like to call the Wombo Combo for that particular rocket, just blows my mind, because the SRA, while yeah, I wouldn't say it was a mind-bendingly hard, difficult, skillful maneuver to pull off with that gadget, the Javelin, it's even easier. Like, it's literally a lock-on weapon. You don't need to try to, whip it around in the air with the SRA. You don't have to do any fancy maneuvers. You literally just point and click at the enemy vehicle, reload really quickly, fire another one off, and then just maintain the lock. And as long as you're able to do that, a monkey could do that, you're gonna get the solid 68 damage. And so I don't know if this is something that DICE intended. I don't know if they're gonna go in and nerf it. It might be the case, but if this is what they intended, this is easily gonna be one of the most effective ways at taking out vehicles in the game. Like, it just does an incredible amount of damage very, very quickly. But now you might be thinking to yourself, well, hot damn, I want to use the Javelin. This sounds amazing, and why would you want to use anything other than this? Like, this sounds like the best anti-vehicle weapon in the game. And while I would say it's a fantastic at taking out land vehicles in some circumstances, it does have some drawbacks. Like, there are some weaknesses to this gadget. And probably the biggest drawback of it is that you have to be out in the open when locking onto a vehicle. And then on top of that, it also notifies the tank driver that they're getting locked onto. And so if they have an idea of what's going on in the game, they can do two things. They can either try to identify where the lock-on is coming from, which isn't all that challenging because the little notifier or little icon that shows the direction, but they can also look to see where the smoke trail of the Javelin is coming and then maybe potentially quickly take you out. The other thing they can do is just simply duck behind cover. They know that you're using a Javelin, and a Javelin requires that you have at least a visual confirmation of their location, and if you duck behind cover and you break that lock, then that Javelin becomes completely useless. Even if the Javelin is traveling through the air, as long as they're able to block line of sight at the last second, the Javelin is going to fly off in a random direction and you're not going to secure that damage. Another weakness of this rocket is that it does not perform very well when the tank is directly next to you. I would much rather prefer using an RPG or the straw if I know a tank is just around the corner, because then I can duck out, I can fire my rocket, then duck behind cover, I secured the damage, and I didn't really leave myself all that vulnerable. But if the tank is right next to me and I'm using a Javelin and I just sit there locking onto it, it's pretty obvious where I am at that point. And as long as the tank driver knows what they're doing, they're going to whip their massive cannon around and then fire a massive canister shell in my face. And so I'm probably not going to last very long. And so in those circumstances, I would much rather prefer using the dumbfire rockets or the straw. And then the final drawback is that if you are not working with a recon player who is using a PLD or a SOFLAM, you are completely useless when a helicopter or an air vehicle flies by. Like, if an air vehicle is directly above you, you can usually just whip out your RPG, fire a rocket at it, and if they're flying low enough, it could be a pretty easy kill. But that is not the case with the Javelin. You can just sit there hoping and praying that a recon player is going to light it up with one of their laser designators, but that doesn't usually happen. I'm finding that a lot of recons are just opting to use all of the other gadgets in the game, like the spawn beacon, you have C4, all of the motion sensors, and a lot of them have phased out the SOFLAMs and the laser designators from their gadgets because a lot of people don't get a whole lot of use out of them. And so if you're running by yourself and you don't have a partner in crime to light up those targets for you, you're not going to be very effective at taking out air vehicles. On the flip side, if you are running with a buddy and you are working in tandem, this is an incredible way at taking out air vehicles. It does have a pretty large flip side because if you lock on to, I think, everything, it's going to do 90% of their health. It's not as powerful as it was back in Battlefield 3. I remember back in Battlefield 3, it was a helicopter's nightmare to get locked on by a Javelin. Like, it was awful, like, because it killed you instantaneously, and DICE decided that was a little bit too game-breaking in Battlefield 4, but it takes them out of the sky almost instantaneously. Like, doing 90% damage to an air vehicle is pretty much a guaranteed kill. Like, if anyone basically sneezes in their general direction, they're pretty much a fireball at that point. Another benefit of having a SOFLAM buddy is that it will also bump up the damage from 34 to 50. So instead of requiring 3 Javelins, it will drop it down to 2. And then on top of that, if all of this wasn't enough, if you are locked on to a laser designated target and then you let the rocket fly, I believe it will always hit. Like, you don't need to maintain the lock. You can quickly reload another Javelin into place, fire that off, and if it's still once again locked on by the laser designator, it will guide itself to its destination. And so not only will you be able to drop them very quickly, doing 50 damage per shot, but it basically takes all of the work away from you and you don't even need to maintain the lock. Like, it is extremely powerful. And so overall, this is going to be a game changer. And while I don't think that it's necessarily overpowered overpowered at this point. Only time will tell. Maybe everyone will just gravitate on over to using the Javelin, and we'll just see a bunch of Javelin spam all day long. What I do know is that this has made the Javelin way more powerful. We're going to see a lot more people using it on the battlefield. It's way more competitive at this point, and while it does have some drawbacks, in some circumstances, as you guys have probably seen throughout today's video, hopefully I've given a good illustration, it is now an extremely effective way at taking out land vehicles. But that is about it for today's video, guys. I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you think so far of the recent changes to the Javelin. Do you love them? Do you hate them? Do you wish they reverted back to what they were before the patch? Let me know down below in the comment section. But until tomorrow, have a good one and take it easy.